It really is. It really is. I know that obviously, understandably and rightly, we play this song in getting set for the Christmas season. And I think we probably even play it in the month of May. But there's nothing like it. There's nothing like it. I say all the time that this is why this is what gets us through the wintertime. What gets us through the wintertime is the magic of Selection Sunday and waiting, knowing that the weather has broken, and man, what a gorgeous weekend, in particular on Friday. I know Saturday was rough and Sunday was, yesterday was weird, but Friday was so nice out and Thursday had been so nice, and people downtown and going down for the games and the Big Ten tournament, and then waiting for Selection Sunday. And if you are a fan of the Purdue Boilermakers, if you're a fan of Matt Painter's team and Elliott Bloom and Brandon Brantley and P.J. Thompson and the guys that have been part of that program and building that program, then you deserve a huge, and you Purdue fans, we're going to ask for your patience here because you're going to get plenty of talk over the next couple of weeks. You know why? Because your team is in the NCAA tournament. And they are, and this is a truly remarkable accomplishment. They're a top 4 seed for the 8th consecutive year. That is remarkable consistency in college basketball in 2025. And I feel for Purdue fans because here you have Purdue that had a fun game in the Big Ten tournament and then obviously gets bounced by Michigan, but kind of no shame in that because Michigan goes on to win the Big Ten tournament. And I think actually it worked out best for Purdue because they did not slide beyond that the 4 line. And I do think, you mark my words, one of these teams, Tennessee or Michigan, one of them that won their respective league is going to be upset before the round of 32. Because I do think that it wears you out. I just do. I think that when you are playing games, and I know they're young guys, I get all of that, but I'm telling you, I think it wears teams out. But congratulations to Purdue and being the lone representation for the state of Indiana in the 2025 men's NCAA basketball tournament. Which leads us to the story with Indiana and not hearing their name called. It was a yo-yo ride for the last 72 to 96 hours. They were in, they were out, they were in, they were out. Like literally, Indiana, when it came to the NCAA tournament, was like listening to them or watching them play Twister or do the hokey pokey. Because, and this was the problem, is they took themselves out of the running by getting beat by Oregon, but notably getting beat by Oregon in the fashion that they did. And by that, I mean in the last couple of minutes, they just weren't competitive. And I know that there is a lot that can be said about it, and we're going to break it down. Here's Indiana's last couple of – we should just play this while we're talking about Indiana and their tournament hopes and odds here throughout the – that's pretty much what they did. That's Indiana trying – that's the tournament selection committee trying to figure out if Indiana's in or out. But let's get to the brass tacks. Indiana is one of the first left out, and North Carolina was the last one in. North Carolina, who has an athletic director who was the committee chairperson. Yes, but those guys have to leave the room, and they are not allowed to opine. Okay, sure. There's power of suggestion all over the place there, okay? Sure, yeah, so that guy's not in the room. Okay, does anybody really believe that influences that doesn't influence what happens either way around? But I believe this. North Carolina since Valentine's Day has lost twice. They lost to Duke twice. That's it. Since Valentine's Day. They were left for dead over the course of the season. And who did North Carolina beat that was impressive? UCLA?
That's their only quad one win.
Okay. They lost it, but they lost to Kansas. They lost to Auburn. They lost to Alabama. They lost to Florida. They beat UCLA. I guess, if anything, they get credit for going out, venturing out, and playing those teams. But when it comes down to it, it comes down to this. North Carolina got in under very shady circumstances. North Carolina got in, sure, if you want to say because they only have 2 losses since Valentine's Day and they were to Duke, but who did they beat in that grouping? Syracuse, North Carolina State, Virginia, Miami, Notre Dame, Wake Forest, okay. But North Carolina getting in and their athletic director getting a $100,000+ bonus for getting them in while also being the chairman of the NCAA selection committee absolutely reeks. It smells funny. It looks funny. It talks funny. It's funny business. But this is the other half of it. North Carolina did not get in at the expense of Indiana. North Carolina probably got in at the expense of West Virginia. West Virginia had some bad losses. They lost to Pitt. They lost to Louisville, Arizona State, Kansas State, Houston. Those are all acceptable. And they did beat Gonzaga. They did beat Kansas. They did beat Iowa State. West Virginia never put together a serious run like a Carolina did at the end where you go, okay, this is pretty impressive. Here's what Indiana did and didn't do. And this is where if you're an Indiana fan, you've got to be fatigued at this point. What are we doing here? What are we doing? Let's just get down to it. What are we doing? You want to claim to be a blue blood program? You want to claim to be an upper echelon program? You want to claim to be a program that coaches around the country should line up to submit their name because it's one of the richest, most tradition-laden, passionate fan-based programs in America that's a blue blood, that's in the same breath outside of the areas where you don't have to, or where you cross over the Wabash and the Ohio and Lake Michigan to get to them? You're telling me that outside the state of Indiana that you still think that people think of Indiana with Kansas, Kentucky, Carolina, UCLA, Louisville, Duke? If that were the case, then it would not be now the rite of passage and the tradition of the rites of spring that Indiana's got to wait out the 11th hour of the tournament selection show to find out whether or not they're in. Indiana should not be holding their breath when they're announcing the teams for Dayton. You can't sit there and say that you are a blue blood program when this is where you are and who you are every single year seemingly. But even with that, if you want to swallow the pride and say, let's make the case for Indiana, okay, let's make the case for Indiana. They had 4 quad 1 wins. Okay? But, and Eddie, I don't know if you can cue up the clip from Wish TV Channel 8 that you sent to me last night. But last night on Wish Television here, they talked to the NCAA selection committee. And this is what they had to say about why Indiana was one of those teams that did not make their way in despite 4 wins in the quad 1.
I tell you, it was tough. Indiana didn't have a single loss outside the first quadrant. But, they didn't play that well in the challenging non-conference schedule. So the metrics were just slightly below the ones that ended up getting in.
To be honest with you, when you look at the opportunities that they had in the quad 1 area, they didn't take advantage of those opportunities in a way, and then their metrics also were down relative to the teams that got into the field. That's really kind of what it came down to.
Now, that doesn't add up because North Carolina's metrics, so to speak, if you look at North Carolina outside, although North Carolina was willing to go out and play a really good non-conference schedule, but not really with any better results than Indiana had. What did Indiana do outside of the Big Ten? They went in the tournament, and they got absolutely their doors blown off by Louisville. They got handled easily by Gonzaga, and then they beat a bad Providence team. North Carolina, though, they lost to Kansas by 3, and Kansas was ranked number 1 at the time. They lost to Auburn by 13. They lost to Michigan State in overtime. They lost handily to Alabama. They lost to Florida. And then they got into conference, and they beat UCLA. So that doesn't necessarily add up, but what about this metric? I know that this shouldn't apply. I know this should not be a factor. I know it shouldn't, but I think it is. I'm not saying that the fans are wrong, but I think this is a factor. I know that in theory and in principle, the committee is looking at blind sheets of paper without a name at the top and trying to analyze and assess based on the metrics, to use their term, what it is that they're simply looking at wins and losses and computer tabulation of strength of schedule, etc. I know in theory that's the discussion. But it's kind of like if you've ever been on jury duty and they say, now, is everybody here not been on social media or read the newspaper in the last 6 months? Is everyone here unfamiliar with Mr. Orenthal James Simpson? You know nothing about this case. You happen to be in a coma when the Bronco chase was going on. Nobody knows anything about it. You have no preconceived notions. You've never heard of him as a football player, right? There's no bias. That's correct. Okay, fine. Let's go. I know that the metrics are supposed to be what they're measured by. But there is no program, West Virginia, Indiana, who were some of the others that were just barely beaten out? Dayton. I know Xavier got in. Those teams that were all on the bubble there in the end.
Ohio State.
Now, I think Ohio State hurt Indiana a little bit because when Indiana got that win over Ohio State, and admittedly, I said on this show after that I thought they were in. I told Don Fischer, I think they're in. But I think Ohio State hurt them a little bit because they got beat so easily by Iowa in their next outing. And I think that lost a little bit of oomph for Indiana. But Indiana's season from a national standpoint has been a talking point now for the better part of 8 to 10 weeks of it being in turmoil. What did the committee know about Indiana that were beyond metrics? What they knew is that they saw on national television, national talking shows and college basketball shows and college basketball reports and media and everything else, they knew that they had seen that the fans at Indiana were chanting in the crowd to have their coach fired at a home game in the middle of the season. And they knew that speculation, and yes, did this happen at Carolina with Hubert Davis? There's been question about Hubert Davis's future, but I don't recall hearing and seeing video clips on national shows of the crowd chanting, "Fire Hubert." Maybe they did. I don't recall it. But Indiana's turmoil and Indiana's instability at the top has been a national talking point about their basketball program for 8 weeks now. And the fact that there was discussion that the coach was going to retire, and then it was like, well, maybe it wasn't. Hold on, like maybe it wasn't that he's retiring, but is he being forced to retire? And what's going to happen here? And then he's coming out and saying, maybe I announced that too early, and maybe I'll stick around longer. I know he was being flippant when he said that, but I think that the turmoil, the questioning, when you have a fan base that over the course of the season is utilizing what they consider to be an underperforming, unsatisfying season in terms of results or lack thereof, and they are going everywhere they can to make it, to be vociferous about the fact that they want a change of direction and start over for their basketball program. And you've got players checking into the game where the student body's booing them. You've got a coach who they have to pot down the video in the pregame so that his portion of it is not as illuminated, so that the crowd doesn't then begin boo more actively. when all of that is going on, then if you're an outside observer of Indiana and somebody says you've got to analyze right now North Carolina, Indiana, West Virginia, Xavier, those teams on the bubble, as an outside observer, you say, well, I don't know a whole lot about these teams before I start looking into the numbers except for this. I know Indiana must have been bad because all I've heard about for the last 6 months or the last 3 months is their fan base telling everybody how bad it is. And writing columns and writing and doing podcasts and everything else about what a disaster their coach is, how they have no stability, how they have no direction, how they have players that are unlikable, how they spent all this money with no return dividends, no return on investment, guys that are talking about the fans sending them death threats. It must be a hornet's nest with Indiana. Their season must have been awful. So who's next? That has to be – I know, and I get it. Till the cows come home, people can tell me that that's not a factor. I get it. But it's difficult to spend, if the basketball season for the last 3 months has been 90 days, it's difficult to spend 89 days complaining to anybody that will listen about how your program needs to change coaches because your program is a complete dumpster fire that you want started over from scratch, and then on the 90th day, tell everybody about how your season merited it continuing. What? Do I think Indiana should have gotten in over North Carolina? I do. Do I think Indiana should have gotten in over Xavier? Yes, probably. But I also think this. I also think the vast majority of Indiana fans, if you put them on a lie detector test right now and said, do you wish Indiana would have gotten in? They'd say yes. And then if you said, do you expect them to do anything in the tournament? They would say, absolutely hell no. So what's it matter? I know that, like, the sake of saying that Indiana should be in the tournament, I get it. But if you're an Indiana fan, you've got to ask yourself, but why? Did you want to continue the punishment? Did you want to get in as a play-in game so that, I'm looking at who's one of the play-in games, Eddie? Who are two of the teams that got one of the play-in game
Texas,
matchups?
Xavier.
Yeah, did you want to get in so you got to go to Dayton and play Xavier?
San Diego State, North Carolina.
I think San Diego State's actually decent, but am I just going off the fact that they were recently in a national title game?
Perhaps.
Watch Carolina make a run and go to the Sweet 16, and then everybody's like, oh, okay.
History shows us that one of these playing teams will make it.
I know.
to
Virginia
the Sweet
Commonwealth
16.
did it, right?
Yep. UCLA did it when during the COVID year.
That's right.
With Johnny Juzang and Tiger Campbell.
Again, I just think for Indiana, did Indiana get robbed? Maybe. But Indiana did not, in my opinion. Indiana had plenty of opportunity. If you don't want to have that discussion and if you want to plead your case, then you don't do it retroactively. You do it in the moment. And, yes, they had great. So they had 4 quad 1 wins. Okay? I understand there's a little bit of hypocrisy there when the committee says that the metrics didn't add up because you're like, well, wait a minute, but they didn't do as much with the opportunities they had. Well, they won in the quad 1 4 times, and North Carolina only did it once. So I get that. I think North Carolina's inclusion is very fishy. But if you look at Indiana in the last 2 months of the season, they had that really bad stretch in late January, early February. Lost to Northwestern, lost to Maryland, lost to Purdue, lost to Wisconsin, lost to Michigan. None of those are terribly egregious losses other than the point margin in a few maybe. But I get it. One of those could have helped, let's say, right? But winning at Michigan State to snap that, to me, impressive. Beating Purdue at home, another good win. I think if they could have gotten where I erred is in that last 2-step with Washington, Oregon, Ohio State, when I was saying I think they just need 2 of those 3. Eddie, I think you were the one that pointed this out in a little bit of a pushback to me. They needed to get that win at Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to get that win at Oregon. I think that would have gotten them in. Not getting that, I think, in the end is what left them out. But I just think that the overall brand of this year, Carolina, Carolina's season this year, the outside perception of Carolina's year was that Carolina had a season that, because it's Carolina, which is the bluest of blue bloods, that you looked at it and said, this is not a typical Carolina year. Wow, what happened to Hubert Davis? Like, remember when they had that miracle run and it looked like they were going to win it all and they were leading Kansas and, et cetera. And then the bottom fell out for them this year and they've really struggled, except for towards the stretch there, down the stretch, the narrative became, look at how Carolina has turned things around. Look at how they're playing well. And then in the ACC tournament, everybody knew how close it was in their loss to the behemoth that is Duke because of the lane violation. Whereas with Indiana, the narrative was Indiana's season, like, what in the world's going on there? They're firing their coach, or he's retiring. Nobody knows exactly why he's leaving, but he's leaving, and the fans want him out, and they're booing him, and they're booing kids, and they're chanting for him to be fired. What a disaster. Again, there are other teams that I think Carolina is fishy as hell. There's no doubt about it. But I think West Virginia is the team that then should have been in if it was not Carolina.
You look at just the losses for Indiana, Jake, and there are three that stick out like a sore thumb. You get blown out by Nebraska. You lose at home on a buzzer beater to Maryland. That's the one I think you can circle, be like, if they get that game, they're probably in, Jake, because that's a really good win. I mean, Maryland is a really good team, and it would have been another win in the quad one. They finished 5-12 in that statistical area. Then, they choked down the stretch against Michigan at home. Like, two key losses for the Hoosiers came at Assembly Hall.
Look at Xavier, another team that was a bubble team, right? But
Yes.
What did Xavier do? They won down the stretch. Their only loss in the last month and a half of the season was to Marquette by a pair, and Marquette's good.
Yeah, they're another team that only had one quad one win as well. They were 1-9, so they didn't have as many chances at North Carolina, but they were 8-2 in quad two.
Somebody pointed
No
this
bad
out.
losses.
Somebody pointed this out yesterday. I thought it was a really good point. The conference records don't matter. Honestly, what you do in your conference doesn't matter. It's what you do in terms of how many of the if you play in a conference, I feel bad for UC Irvine because they had a good year. They won a ton of games. They won the majority of games they played in. The big majority of them. 90% of the games they played in, they won. But they didn't get the opportunity because of their conference to go out and get quad one wins. And a lot of schools like that, it's difficult for them because teams don't want to play them. If you're Arizona, if you're UCLA, what is there to benefit by playing Cal Irvine? So they just got to play in their league, win as many games as they can, and then they don't get the opportunity for so I think teams that have nightly opportunity for quad one wins, they get penalized if they don't go, say, 500 in them. Indiana had 4, yes, but how many losses did they have within the quad one? How many missed opportunities? Indiana was more penalized for missed opportunities than they were rewarded for taking advantage, more so than others. We got a huge show lined up. Don Fischer is going to join us next. Also, Mike Chappell's going to join us because there's still some NFL free agency news to go over and put a tie on. Mike DeCourcy will talk with us about the selection committee and the tournament breakdown. And, of course, the always anticipated kids go crazy for this. I mean, I went the other day to get a car wash, and the car wash was lined up all the way, road blockage on Friday at the car wash lined up, right? And I said, it must be because everybody's got that monthly pass or whatever. And they said, well, yes, that, and also because we're trying to get a visual of what it looks like for your phone lines when the numbers game takes place. And we have the numbers game, and it is exciting because we have sponsors, ways for you could win lunch for a week's worth of lunches based on our numbers game that we'll do starting out giving numbers today. And Eddie's been working tirelessly, didn't go to bed till 4:30 in the morning with fabulous sounders for the number. This is radio gold, folks. So too is Don Fischer. He joins us next. It's hard to believe, by the way, that the basketball season has indeed come to an end for Indiana, not because of the way that their season ended, but just because it goes so fast, right? It doesn't seem like long ago that we were talking about whether or not Indiana is going to be able to go to Ohio State and beat them in football and that kind of thing. Indiana, of course, not playing in any of the postseason tournaments, opting out of or making it known that they would not accept an NIT bid if that had come their way, and then the other various tournaments. So joining us now on the always busy and available now for your company to sponsor guest line, Don Fischer. And Don, as you know, we are here to talk spring football preparations, right? Let's go. That's right. And people are excited about it, man. But so let's just do this. I mean, to kind of put a tie on the season in general, the disappointment, Don, would be this, and that is I understand why people are upset that, say, Carolina got in and Indiana did not. But at the same time, and I hate to put it this simply, but if you are Indiana, you should not be in that position, right, to sweat out Selection Sunday. I don't really totally understand the way you measure quad one wins and bad losses and that kind of thing. I just thought it felt like a year that while they had stretches to play well, I never got the feeling that Indiana was in a consecutive streak of games where they really looked in control of themselves. Does that make sense?
Last week when we talked, I said, Indiana's on the bubble supposedly, but I think if they beat Oregon, they'll be in the tournament. And that's exactly what would have happened.
Yeah, you're right. And I was wrong, Don, because I really do wonder. This is going to sound crazy because we could sit here and go back and, it's like the movie The Sixth Sense, right? After the fact, you go back and think of 20 different scenes and you go, wait a minute, how did I not know it then? The Ohio State game, when they beat Ohio State, I really thought that punched their ticket. But I wonder, Don, if it also didn't hurt them that Ohio State was beaten, pretty handily by Iowa to open Big Ten play and thus take that luster off. And you are correct. And then at that point, Indiana would have needed one of those last two games against Oregon. You were right, because we talked a week ago, and I was convinced they were in, and you were saying, Jake, I don't know. They might have one last assignment here. And that apparently did them in. You're right.
I mean, here's the thing, Jake. You don't leave it in the committee's. You don't leave it in the committee's hands if you don't have to. And Indiana left it in the committee's hands because they got beat by Oregon back to back, and in the two games they played in 10 days. The Ohio State win was a really big win for them in the sense that puts them in a position where they can take themselves out of that bubble picture if they win, but they didn't.
Don, where do you think they missed it? Just overall, when now that you've had a chance to kind of look back at the year, when you really look at the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle for Indiana that just didn't click What area was it that just never fired for them?
Jake, if I answer that question, I'm going to get people really upset, and I'm not going to answer that question that way. and I'm telling you, I've said this before. You have to have the understanding going in of what kind of team you want to have and how it fits your culture. And the transfer portal makes that very difficult these days. The transfer portal is a crapshoot. Do you get players that fit what you're looking for and fit your culture? Do you get players that maybe don't fit your culture, but it's what you're looking for? And you know what? It's a combination of the two. And if you're not looking at both, I think you're in trouble. I'm not so sure that we looked at both with this last group. And I'm not putting these players down individually or anything like that. Did they fit? Does it fit what you're trying to do as a coach? I don't. I just think they picked the best guys they could find out of that portal, the best players they thought could come in here and help them. And I don't know that culturally or character-wise or any of that kind of thing, whether it fit or not. And that to me is as big a structure problem as I think this team could have had this year, and I think it failed them.
You know, Don, we've probably had this discussion before. Don Fischer's our guest. I think the world as a coach in terms of I think John Calipari is a very good basketball coach. I don't know him personally, but I think he's a very good basketball coach. And even at Kentucky towards the end there, there's no question that he was able to accumulate talent. Some years that talent meshed together and they were dynamite. Other years there were 6 really strong Pistons, but they didn't fire in sync. And it was, okay, start over and redo it again next year. And eventually I think Kentucky, that also wore itself out. I just think I don't know, Don. What I'm getting at is the two of us, I think, are in agreement here. College basketball is becoming more and more so an annual mystery with your team because of the way in which you have to structure your roster. And I don't know what that – I guess maybe that's part of the intrigue, but it is very challenging to try to figure out from one year to the next. I give a ton of credit to Matt Painter and Purdue because for right now they've been able to hold on to it of building a system and a program and a structure. And I think you got to be proud of what they've done because it's very impressive what they've been able to do from a continuity standpoint.
Oh, no question. I agree with you 100%. I mean, Matt goes out and tries to find the players that fit what he wants, fit how they and they fit, and he puts them together because he knows how they're going to adapt to the program. How many guys leave Purdue to go someplace else? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, it's hardly anybody. I mean, you're always going to have somebody that's disgruntled because of playing time or something like that, and yet there are guys on his team. Caleb First may be a perfect example. Caleb First was a starter 2 years ago and one of the best players in their team. And last year, he hardly played. This year, he's playing again. Why? Because he believes in the program, the structure of the program, and the coach that's coaching him. And that's what you're talking about when you're building a culture, building a program. You've got to have those kinds of people that buy in no matter whether the playing time is as much as they want or it's not. They buy into what the coach is selling. And that's why Matt Painter's program has sustained itself through these many years now and why it's gotten better and better through the years. And if you get that special player or two, along with the other guys that are role players on your basketball team, you've got something special there. And I think that's why Purdue has been successful. And I give Matt a lot of credit because I think he built his program and kind of structured it old school-wise on culture, character, and those kinds of things.
Don, this was, if I'm not mistaken, for Don Fischer, and my math may be off here, was this the 52nd season you've done Indiana basketball or 51st?
52nd.
Okay, 52nd. So, and I know how much fun you had. I mean, it was clear how much fun you had with the football season, which was, just an unbelievable run, and no reason to believe that doesn't continue in the fall, the way that they've got things going. And now, obviously, we don't know the direction of the basketball program or who's going to be leading it. But what is the mindset of a veteran broadcaster at the end of the season in terms of the time you take off to kind of reflect and then get rejuvenated for year 53?
I'm rejuvenated already, and I am. That's the truth. I'm looking forward to what's going to happen next year. I'm looking forward to the football season for next year. I'm looking forward to a basketball season next year with the new regime of the coaching staff and new players and those kinds of things. Because that's what's in college basketball and football today. That's what it's all about. It's going to be the next season if you had a bad one, and to build on that season you just had if it's a good one. And you see who can do that and who's the best at it. And you hope you get a coach that's really, really good at understanding this whole scenario. And it's a different world that we live in today from a college athletic standpoint, football and basketball especially, because they're the two marquee programs that every school is trying to build on. And it's very difficult these days from a coaching perspective. And it's one of the reasons why there are a lot of coaches, old school coaches, who are pretty much fed up with it and they're out of here. And I understand that completely. But from a broadcaster standpoint, I'm just looking forward to next year again.
Don, who's the next coach going to be?
I have no idea.
Don Fischer, right?
That's the truth. I mean, they don't ask me for my input. Therefore, I have no idea because I'm not asking them until the end because I know they won't tell me.
Hey, I wanted to clarify one other thing with you, too, in all seriousness. Obviously, since we talked last, we know, and this is the world of college basketball and coaching and everything else, that Fran McCaffrey, is out at Iowa. But I wanted to circle back and just kind of cement this with you because I think this is correct. And I know that on the sidelines, he's a super intense dude, no question about it. But if I'm not mistaken, you had told me that in your dealings with opposing coaches in pregame interviews that you found Fran McCaffrey to be as accommodating and really as approachable as anybody currently coaching. Is that correct?
That is correct. I would say that he and there are many in the Big Ten, and so I don't want to just single out Fran or Tom Izzo, or there are a lot of guys, Chris Collins. I mean, just about every coach that I talk to. Dusty May's in the Big Ten now. I know I'm always going to get an interview with them. So there are people, but I've been around long enough now to build relationships with a lot of these guys. And there are several that I don't have relationships with, and we don't do pregame interviews with them because they don't want to do those kinds of things with the opposing radio, which I've always thought was kind of silly because I think opposing radio gives that audience a chance to hear that coach.
Right, get to know their program a little bit,
himself. Yeah. Exactly. It's a chance for him to promote himself. But here's the thing. Fran McCaffrey, he was there for 15 years. He's done now. I texted him yesterday and thanked him for 15 years of doing every single interview I asked him to do in that 15-year period of time. Every time we played Iowa, I got a pregame interview, and I got pregame interviews. If I would have needed him for an interview for anything else, I could have called him and said, "I need you to have 3 minutes of my time or 3 minutes of your time to tell me what you think about this," and he would have done it. He was just as accommodating as anybody I've ever worked with, and I've got a whole bunch of those guys like that in the Big Ten that we've been doing this for years with. And granted, there are some guys that don't do it, and there's probably good reasons why they don't. But just about everybody I've had a chance to work with through these years, I've been able to build that relationship as long as they're at the school they're at. And then they may be gone, and we got to start all over again. So at any rate, Fran McCaffrey was a terrific interview. I always did it, always accommodating, always had great conversations with him before we did the interview itself, because some of these guys like to talk about their programs and those kinds of things off mic, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Love it. And listen, I got a lot of respect for him. He was a fun coach to watch for sure, and I've always kind of liked Iowa, but wanted to share that about Fran McCaffrey. Don, you were obviously in that same category because over the course of the basketball season, sometimes you had to come on here where IU basketball was not, in a hot streak or always a good talking point. But you've always joined us, and lo and behold, football season's right around the corner, man. So let's go, right? But I certainly appreciate it over the course of the basketball season.
It's right after golf season.
That's right. Which for you never ends, right?
Oh, it does end. Trust me. I wish I didn't have to restart all over again with a golf instruction teacher that has to teach me everything I forgot from the year before. But I love playing golf, and we're going to play a lot of it this summer again.
All right, we'll hit them straight. Enjoy it, and we will certainly be talking to you because football season and all that will be here before we know it. So I always appreciate it.
You might want to talk to me if we get a new coach too. You know?
Yeah, well, for sure. That's exactly correct. As a matter of fact, let me ask that. So when they do that, which we'll see when that is, Don. Will you do any sort of like a special coaches show or that sort of thing with whoever the hire is once it happens?
Well, I won't do a coach's show with whoever it is, but I will do an interview with that guy because the university, or at least the athletic department, has always asked me to do an introductory type of interview with that coach, and therefore it will be on their website at some point in time. So yeah, I've always been able to do that, or they've asked me to almost every time we've gotten a new coach into the program. So I'm looking forward to that, whoever it may be.
Well, we're marking it down right now. New coach hired on a Wednesday. Don Fischer joins us 12:30 that Thursday. We're locking it in. All right.
Sounds good, man.
All right, appreciate it. Enjoy the golf links. Don Fischer joining us on the program. When we come back, it is much anticipated. We will explain and lay out for you how the numbers game works next. works. Let me tell you something. It could be literally the middle of July, and I'm pumping gas. Pumping ethyl, as the kids like to say. And somebody will walk up to me and go, excuse me. Yeah. And they go, any chance I can get a number for the tournament? People go crazy for this. And kids, Eddie, they love it, the numbers game. They absolutely love it.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
You mentioned the numbers game, and people just started calling in.
So here's how we do this. If you're new to the show.
Where have you been?
Thank you. Valerie is the official number distributor of the program. She's done this for years. She puts them into an algorithm, and then it spits out a list.
That's a different variation of our translator.
It is a bit.
The elixir.
Each of the 68 teams in the 2025 NCAA tournament field have been randomly assigned a number. Actually, I take that back. The play-in teams you get, because we do this up until Thursday. So you if you happen to hit, it's like a daily double. If you pick a number that has one of the play-in games, you actually get both teams. But here is your way to win. There are 3 ways to win. If you get the team that wins the NCAA tournament, you're a winner. If you get the team that is the double-digit seed that advances the furthest, you are a winner. Now, let's just say hypothetically that 2 11 seeds both get to the Final Four. Then it becomes, because it defaults to which one goes the furthest, right? Of the 11 seeds to advance the furthest, it would be if they both get beat, or if they both get beat in the same round, whichever one then beats the higher seed gets beat by the higher seed in that final round.
But what if it's a tie?
Thank you for asking. If they both get beat by a 2 seed, for example, then it becomes cumulatively which one had the closer. They won by the more points throughout the course of the tournament. So they were the better representative. Thank you again. Then it becomes alphabetical. Now, same thing for this. The third way that you can win is if you have the team that got blown out by the largest margin. Tiebreaker for that would be if 2 teams both get beat by 38, it's the one that gets beat by the worst team, because you're defaulting to being the worst. So if you get the worst team in here, you got a chance. Now, if you, whatever way you win, 1 through 3, you get a hat, courtesy of me. I go every year online and I buy a hat from whatever school it might be, and so that you can parade around that hat with great pride and tell people where you want it. But in addition to that, we have on the program an individual who will be getting the very first team. He has already told me what number he would like, but other people, we're not going to have him have monopoly on the number, so that in case he wins, he's going to be able to share it. But Cluster Truck has decided to sponsor this fabulous segment, because when you're talking about America's first delivery-only kitchen, you're talking about people that want to deliver for you, and that's exactly what Cluster Truck wants to do for the winners. And Evan Sherrill from Cluster Truck joins us now on the program to get us kicked off for the numbers game. Evan, first off, I want to thank you sincerely, because without Cluster Truck coming through for us, then this game basically becomes nothing, right?
Yes, sir. Hey, happy to help. Look, if it's on the fan, if it has to do with March, Cluster Truck wants to be involved with it. So thank you for having us.
I absolutely love it. Now, first off, before we do so, let's let people know, I can't imagine, Evan, that anybody is not familiar with Cluster Truck, but you guys are an Indianapolis staple institution now. You are a part of the culture of Indianapolis. But for those that are unfamiliar with it, give me the rundown on what people can get when it comes to Cluster Truck.
That's very kind of you. Cluster Truck is a delivery and pickup only kitchen. We deliver everywhere from Fountain Square up through Carmel. It is always free delivery. We have over 100 items on the menu, all of it chef-made in-house, delivered by our drivers. And if you use code FAN at checkout, you get $5 off your order of $25 or more.
Nice. Code is FAN, right? F-A-N, right?
Yep, FAN, F-A-N.
As in the radio station. Okay, now, and people are a fan of Cluster Truck, as we are. In addition to that, what we know is this. You have been so kind as to, and I've mentioned this before, the third place, largest blowout winner is going to get $25 gift card to Cluster Truck, correct?
Correct.
The second place, that would be the double-digit seed to advance the furthest. They are going to get a $50 gift card to Cluster Truck, correct?
That is correct.
Now, here's the big one. The big kahuna, the grand prize for whoever it is that draws the national champion, they are going to get what fabulous prize from Cluster Truck, Evan?
They are getting a week of free Cluster Truck. That is an order every single day for a week on the house, on Cluster Truck.
That is fabulous. Okay, and then obviously when that happens, we will get you in touch with them so that from an email standpoint, that can all be taken care of. Now, you told me earlier that you wanted to pick a number, okay? And I said, okay, we will give you the first team. But I'm not going to tell people what number you picked because I'm going to allow you. You're basically going to have a partner because I don't want you to deny somebody this awesome opportunity at Cluster Truck. So this is a team, you're simply playing for a hat from me, okay? You gave me the number. I'm not going to tell you what number. I'm not going to say out loud what number it is because we're still going to give this team away to a listener as well. But here is the team, Evan Sherrill of Cluster Truck, that you received. Eddie, go ahead. Evan, if I told you that this team is going to make you a penny lover, would you know what team I'm talking about?
Oh, man, a penny lover. No, I do not.
One would assume perhaps Coppin State because it sounds like copper, for example. Maybe somebody would think that it's somebody who goes by the Centennials because a penny's 1 cent. The team coached by Penny Hardaway, the Tigers of Memphis is who you got, Evan. So you may be rocking a Memphis hat at some point.
Is that a 5 seed? I like that.
I think what is Memphis seeded? They are a 5 seed indeed, Evan. I like that.
Is that a Colorado State matchup? I think I picked Colorado State in my first bracket.
Look at you. Look at you.
May have to change that now, Evan.
I'm sorry. Evan, are you sure you haven't been sitting here breaking down brackets all day? Yes, that is correct.
Hey,
I believe they opened with Colorado State. But Memphis is who you got. Evan, I appreciate it. Everybody loves Cluster Truck. We look forward to getting word out about you as if it needs any more of that. And keep in mind, not only do you have a 5 seed, but people can get $5 off by using the code FAN on a $25 delivery from Cluster Truck. Appreciate it, Evan. We'll talk to you soon, all right?
Thank you very much. Yep. And chirp, chirp. Shout out to the Ball State women.
How about that? The Ball State women are in, baby. And I think their coach is going to be on the morning show. So fans got you covered all the way around. All right, Mike Chappell's going to join us next. And then as soon as we're done talking with Chapp towards the bottom of the hour, about 15 minutes from now, maybe 20, we're going to start giving numbers away. So we'll give you the cue on when that happens, but that's how you do it. You give me your favorite number, we give you the team, and now you know what you can win. A couple of upset specials here. I always here's one for you. And this team upset Kansas, was it last year or 2 years ago? Might have been last year. I wouldn't want to face Arkansas in the first round.
Woo Pig Suey?
Woo Pig Suey, that's right. Arkansas taking on Kansas. Kansas has been inconsistent. Arkansas is starting to, I don't know. Calipari does this, right? His teams play well towards the end of the year.
Just wait till you hear the sounder that I have for the Razorbacks. What was that?
That was a Razorback. That was a hog. That's not bad.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a lot of times in August when I go to the state fair, they ask if I can do like hog calls and stuff like that because it's a unique skill that I possess. BYU. I could see BYU making a little noise because Wisconsin likes to play at a fast tempo and BYU thrives on it. But then
BYU's mascot is your third grade teacher, right?
What's that?
BYU's mascot is your third grade teacher, right?
Actually, freshman year English.
Sorry, a cougar?
That's correct. No, she wasn't a cougar, though. She was young. Well, I shouldn't say her name. I had an English teacher that was like her in my sophomore year. It's her first year out of college. She was only there at North Central for a year, unfortunately. Joining us now, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so based on that segue, Mike Chappell is the writer for the Colts when it comes to CBS 4 and WXIN Fox 59. Chap, have you done your bracket yet?
No, I don't because I don't pay enough attention during the year, and it'd be throwing darts, which the way some of these brackets go, I'd probably do pretty good with it. But
totally.
No, you know, one of the all-time, and it's one of the all-time great skits, Saturday Night Live, was with Peyton and was it Amy Poehler when he was just the knowledgeable sportscaster and she was a blonde and
right.
And she always picked all the right ones. That's what I would be. I'd be the ditzy blonde picking the.
Well, that's this year actually. I'm going to do an NCAA bracket this year because if you look at the fact that the top seeds are Auburn, Alabama, Florida, Duke's obviously really good, but Alabama's really good, BYU. I'm going to do one where I'm going to pick all the games as if it was football.
There you go, chalk.
Probably end up with the exact same
football programs.
Yeah. Probably end up with the same Final Four. Okay, Chap.
So you can't go with Duke then. Duke could be.
But
early out.
But you could have, like Duke, for example, if you had Duke getting beat, if you did it this way, you could have Duke getting beat by either Mississippi State or Oregon, and both of those are totally plausible in basketball. Not plausible, but it wouldn't be a total stunner, right? In football, it absolutely would happen, right? Either of those two.
Right.
All right, Chap,
Right.
let's kind of recap free agency for the Colts. In terms of things that have happened since we talked last, so notably things that happened over the weekend, and what you still anticipate could be in the cards for them, the floor is yours.
Probably not a lot free agency. They'll sign. I think they just signed David Long, a corner they had last year. We're going to see signings now that really don't move the needle for the fans, which they moved the needle last week. I mean, let's give them some credit that they moved the needle pretty heavily last week. Now is after you've addressed the top of the roster with these big signings, it's about getting the bottom of the roster settled because you're going to need, I hate to hear it, you're going to need everybody to play. You're going to have injuries, so everybody's important. They've got to have depth on the defensive line. They thought they had with Raekwon Davis last year. That didn't work. So Neville Gallimore steps in. So we're going to see guys that fill the fourth corner, the defensive line. They need an offensive lineman, but I think they're going to be sort of quiet now until the draft. They've got to totally redo the tight ends room, which everybody knows. And I mean totally redo it. It may, there may be Drew Ogletree and Will Mallory and new people. And I'm not even convinced that both those guys will be back. So I think they've really done what they're going to do, other than, again, sign maybe a couple guys at near league minimums, getting Wesley French and Danny Penner back. That doesn't move the needle, but you're adding interior depth. That's where you are right now. And they still need an outside linebacker to replace E.J. Speed. So, but I think they what they've done with the signings to this point, primarily the safety and the corner, is it's really given them flexibility in the draft to go and get the tight end. Whether, and we've probably talked, if you want Tyler Warren, you probably better be prepared to move up to get him. I'm pretty convinced he won't be there at 14. So how high do you think you need to go to get him? And if you think he's that good, I'm not saying Brock Bowers level, but close. If that's the case, then giving up an extra draft pick or two to get him shouldn't matter. So that's kind of where I think they transition now into draft mode because they've done some pretty significant things in free agency.
I want to go back to the tight end position. Chap, oftentimes Chris Ballard, it's seemingly he has kind of narrowed in on a position each year. Like each offseason, it's like, okay, this is the offseason for offensive linemen, or this is the offseason for receivers. I think we've known that defensive back and tight end are the two that were of the most need in the last probably 2 years. It looks like this is going to be an offseason. I've seen a lot of people that have given like negative grade to the Colts so far to this point, and I think that those must be people that were not paying a lot of attention to what the Colts' needs were, because it feels to me like he has addressed their biggest needs both in the same or is about to in the same offseason. But am I giving too much credit?
No, I agree. And I think a lot of those negative grades, I really do, is because they signed Daniel Jones. How could you be upset by giving a starting corner and a starting safety that kind of money? You can't. That's what you have to do. I think it's because they told us they were going to have competition at quarterback, and then you're saying, well, and it's Daniel Jones, and I understand that, and maybe more so that they gave him $14 million, which if you're going to bring in serious competition, you're going to pay significant money. I guess what I would argue to people that if that's the reason they gave a bad grade to it is, okay, take Daniel Jones out of the equation. Who did you want? Who should they bring in? Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, Gardner Minshew at the time? Who? Give me a name. Just don't, diss on Daniel Jones. And I understand there's a lot there to be critical of, but if not him, who? So I really think that's where the negative comments are. But again, if you've paid attention, as those of us around here do, you knew what they had to do and who the type of player and position they had to go after, and they did that.
Of the players that the Colts have yet to announce that they have re-signed, Mike Chappell's our guest on the guest line. The player that you would most anticipate still is going to end up re-signing with Indianapolis, and the player that still has the most free agent marketability elsewhere that last played for Indianapolis are who?
Boy, I wish I had my list in front of me. I'm driving to the complex now to talk to Cam Bynum. Marketability, if you had marketability, you would have been signed. And I'm thinking of Julian Blackmon. I'm thinking of E.J. Speed. I think Blackmon got that culture shock, career shock last offseason, and E.J. Speed's getting it this offseason. I think he really thought he was going to get interest. He hasn't. Well, I need to see the list.
Okay, I'll give you a couple names here, okay? Mo Alley Cox.
I would re-sign him as my fourth tight end. I don't think they do.
Okay. Taven Bryan.
No.
Sam Ehlinger.
No.
Mark Glowinski.
No.
Kylan Granson already signed. Ryan Kelly already signed. Dio already signed elsewhere. I mean, Will Fry's already signed elsewhere. Grant Stewart signed elsewhere. Okay. Danny Pinter re-signed. So really the only ones we're missing here would be, you mentioned Blackmon, Trey Sermon, E.J. Speed.
No and no. No, they just signed a free agent running back, Herbert, and E.J. Speed. I don't know how it would be even remotely a good fit to bring him back here and say, oh, by the way, you really are a sometimes linebacker, but a really strong special teams player, and that contract's going to reflect that. I don't think that works on either end. he was a guy that, again, God love him. He played well for 2 seasons. When Shaq Leonard, got hurt and couldn't play anymore, but I think he wasn't what they needed certainly at that position. So again, that list that you read, there's no one of all those guys most likely to re-sign. Gosh, I'd say Sam Ehlinger. I don't think there's much chance at all that he comes back. So I wouldn't be opposed to drafting a quarterback in round 4.
That's what's going to be interesting. If Quinn Ewers is around in round 4, somebody like that.
Does he remind you of Sam Ehlinger? I mean, sort of.
Yeah.
Sort of. It never hurts to bring in a guy to develop. I don't know that Jason Bean is that guy. I don't know. He hasn't been here long enough to really say. So that's why I say I think they've pretty well done what they wanted to do. Trey Hendrickson. No, I think now that the Bengals got their 2 receivers, they're going to find ways to bring Hendrickson back. And I think this team had interest in him. I really do, to really make a splash in free agency. But I think the Bengals wanted way too much compensation. So I think they're pretty much done with significant, even semi-significant signings. It's on to the draft.
All right, Chap, we'll continue to watch it. We'll look for your interview as well after you write about that with Bynum, and then we will talk to you again next week and get everybody caught up on anything that happens between now and then, including I just did a tournament bracket based strictly off of college football winners, and I have Texas winning it all. So there we go.
Well, then you should have put an IU in the tournament, right, with football base.
That's right. IU should have gotten in over Carolina. And football also, it's a fraud. Right.
I understand all the analytics. Was there any analytics other than your eyes that told you that this IU team didn't belong in the tournament?
Yeah, Carolina's fans didn't cheer and chant for the coach to get booed halfway through the year, or the coach to get fired. I mean, I'm being flippant, but when they started booing and chanting about the coach getting fired halfway through the year, I think the rest of the country said, "Man, IU must suck."
Right. Well, and at times they did, and I feel bad for the players, but they had
they had a lot of chances, man.
Win one game in the Big Ten tournament, they're in.
Yep, a lot of chances and a lot of squandered ones, but we'll see. All right, Chap, we'll talk to you next week.
You well, guys.
All right, Mike Chappell joining us on the program. All right, Eddie, the time is here. And by the way, I just sat there and clicked through. Out of curiosity, just a couple of the games, like you look at it, if it were football, and it's kind of the same tournament. It's kind of crazy. The same teams are ones that, Alabama, Auburn, Texas, Michigan.
Look at the phone lines, Jake.
Eddie, people go crazy for the numbers game. I'm telling you. 239-1070 is the telephone number. People love it. This is radio gold is what this is. I'm surprised, to be honest with you. We've got Cluster Truck on board with this. I buy the hats. I buy the hats out of the goodness of my own heart, okay? Kansas City fan Steve, he's got one of I can't remember the school it was last year that he got a hat for, but he got one. He got the team blown out by the largest margin. I still have last year whoever had Carolina State and they were the double-digit seed to go the furthest. I still have the North Carolina State hat in the box. Got one. Nobody ever claimed it. But I'm telling you, you win a hat and then Cluster Truck, and it's only a matter of time before the Marconi's in the mail as well. We will begin with Dan, who will lead us off, I believe. Eddie's telling me, hang on just a second, because people are lined up so frantically that Eddie is literally, he looks like a clown and doing a juggling act. He's got phone lines going all over the place. Eddie hates this segment. I'm like, Eddie, you fired up for the numbers game? And he goes, well, I have a love-hate relationship with it. So you know the way it works. You call in, you give me a number of significance to you. Once we start getting deep into numbers that have been given out, then I need you folks to pay attention. That's the part that becomes hard. When I say the following numbers are available, and I list off like the 6 remaining numbers, don't be a jackass and call in and ask for a number that is not one of those that's available. Okay, we have callers lined up. Is that correct? Today is
Yes.
St. Patrick's Day, right?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to make sure we had all the callers ready. That way I could be active in writing down names and we can cross-reference.
Because it's St. Patrick's Day, it is only fitting that we lead by taking a shot at number 1 with Jameson. Jameson, happy St. Patrick's Day to you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Not only is it St. Patrick's Day, but it's actually Indianapolis Day because it's 317. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Love to hear it.
Jameson, what number would you like?
Taking 20 off the board.
20. And do you understand how the game works, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Jameson, who are you? You're a fan of who in college basketball?
I'm an IU alum, but I can't say I'm a fan. Definitely a fan, but disappointed by the IU job there.
Of the most recent coaches that Indiana had, which one did you actually feel like was the most successful? Besides Bob Knight.
Tom Crean on paper.
Tom Crean, you got the school that Tom Crean actually ended up coaching after Indiana, the Bulldogs of Georgia, off the board to Jameson. All right, up next we have Jim. Hi, Jim. How are you?
Good. How's it going?
Good. You sound like a nice guy, Jim. Everything going okay at home and everything? Sounds like you're in a good mood.
Yeah, everything's going good. Yeah, I got a mutual friend of yours, Kyle Knezovich.
Oh, yeah. We know Kyle here, of course, a legend of the radio station.
Hopefully, Keezy will get me a good number.
All right, what number would you like here?
Let's go with 45.
Number 45. Not bad. As a matter of fact, if this were the football bracket, you'd be in really good shape. But one of those schools out of the loaded SEC that I think probably has some muscle to it based on coming out of that conference. Mississippi State off the board to Jim. Dan, I believe, is up next. Dan, how are you?
I'm fantastic. How are you guys?
Good. Dan, what line of work are you in?
I'm actually work for the company. I'm your compliance and enforcement inspector.
I love that. Okay, now, and with this being the NCAA tournament, you've done a check. All schools are compliant within NCAA rules, correct?
I'm not sure about North Carolina.
You are correct. Yes, that is correct. There's some fishiness going on there. All right, Dan, what number would you like?
For A.J. Foyt, number 14.
Okay. Number 14 for A.J. Foyt. This is one of those schools that might actually, they tell me that when you hear the sound of the school itself, Eddie, when you hear the sound for number 14, you think cute and cuddly. But my understanding is they're the bullies of the backyard. The Blue Jays of Creighton are off the board. And they may be coached by a guy whose name you might hear a lot recently. We'll see. I don't know if McDermott's a legit candidate for Indiana or just a rumored one. All right, Dennis is up next. Dennis, you understand how we do the numbers game, right? Are you a veteran of the program? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Dennis, do you drink a lot of coffee?
About a 20 ounce a day.
Yeah. Was that like 5 minutes ago?
Nope.
Okay. Dennis, what number would you like?
That was at 6:30 this month.
Okay. What number would you like, Dennis?
I will go with Mickey Mouse, number 7, please.
Okay. I think that you came up from the bottom of the ocean just long enough for us to hear that you wanted number 7. And Eddie, you said this is a fabulous sounder for Dennis. Go ahead. That sounds like an angry hog, right?
Yeah,
he's a Razorback.
Yeah.
Woo, Pig Suey, Arkansas. Dennis, you got Arkansas. All right, we got time for a couple more here. We will go with, do we have another Dennis?
No, I had put him on hold.
Okay, Nick. Nick is up next. Hi, Nick. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Nick, if you don't mind me asking, I'm well, thank you. What if anything, out of the lunacy that is the numbers game, what's your favorite part of it, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I've been part of it since you and Kev started it back in the day, but I think it's just it gives you another little team to root for that might not be your own.
Thank you. And Nick, that's what we're trying to do here, right? That's what
right.
I'm trying to create for you a reason, especially if you're like an Indiana fan. Now you feel like you're still in the tournament. That's the whole idea. All right, Nick, what number would you like?
Give me 5.
Number 5. Any significance to the number 5 for you?
Danny Sullivan.
Oh, man, spin to win, right, baby?
That's right.
Spin to win, Nick. Here's the thing. If you were to take your middle finger and directionally extend it towards somebody, what would you be doing? What is it you would be doing? You take your not your middle finger. I'm sorry. Your index finger. Sorry. If you were to take your index finger and extend your arm out in the direction of somebody else, you are doing what to them?
Pointing them.
Okay, that's correct. And if you were doing it to Eddie, what sort of a point would it be? If it were to Eddie, it would be a high point. All right, Nick, high point is who you got. Thank you very much. I believe Charles will round us out here with this edition of the Numbers Game. Hi, Charles. How are you?
Good, Jerry. How are you, Dad?
Good. Charles, you remember that Charles Chips Company? Are you old enough to remember that?
I'm 56. So I do actually.
Did you ever get a tin of Charles chips when you were a kid, or have a tin laying around the house?
No, but actually, my neighbor, they love them. So
Yeah.
I got plenty. Yes.
They're collectible, those tins now, I believe. You should get yourself one. Charles, what number would you like?
I'm going to go 44.
44. Charles, if you don't mind me asking, I'll ask you the same question. Tell me what it is that you like about this actual segment that we do, the numbers game. Yeah, what do you like about it?
Just it gives, like you said earlier, it gives you more teams to root for. I'm a Purdue fan, so I'm hoping I get to just root for them for a while.
Okay.
Can't wait for you to call in on the 8th.
Here's the thing, Eddie.
Right.
Here's the thing. Go ahead and hit the sounder for Charles. Now that sounds to me like some mayo that's dropping. And of course, we know the manufacturer of the horrific mayo. And the funny thing about Charles is, in England, Charles is a king, right? But in this game, he's not a king of this game, but he's going to be close to it. Charles, you got Duke, as in Duke's mayo. You got Duke,
I
baby.
will take that, sir. Thank you very much.
There you go. Just put some of that Duke's mayo perhaps on that cluster truck that's going to come your way if you win lunch for a week. I'll tell you that much.
Is he calling us on April 8th?
Is that the day after the tourney?
Yep.
He's got a real good chance, So Duke is off the board. So off the board already, we've got Creighton is gone, Arkansas is gone, High Point is gone, Duke is gone, and Mississippi State is gone. And that is how we do the numbers game, which we will continue to do. But we do have other things to talk about, including the Pacers, and as well as that, getting you a little bit more into some serious talk about the bracket. We'll do both next. Not sure when we will do the number giveaway again, but I have to always give this clarification. When it comes to the numbers giveaway, unfortunately, the radio phone line is the only way to go. Everybody and their brother asks if they can text a number or tweet for a number, and the numbers committee, rules committee, which is me,
and me,
is kind of like the North Carolina athletic director and the chair of the NCAA selection committee, where it's all about what's in the best interest of me. And what's in the best interest of me is to keep it simple, because while I appreciate the enthusiasm for the numbers game, if I honored for every person that texted in, I had 148 people that texted yesterday to ask that exact question. So we got to limit the fashion with which we're doing it. But I absolutely love it. I do love doing the numbers game. Pacers in action tonight, big one in Minnesota, because if you look at what happened against Milwaukee, and that was a tough one because Tyrese Halliburton was kind of back to Tyrese Halliburton ways, but they just couldn't get over proverbial like the 5 to 7 point hump, if you will.
Anytime they went to the bench, Jake, it was bad.
Yeah, the bench really struggled.
I mean, McConnell was minus 31 on the night and plus minus, and 4 of the 5 starters were plus. So, like, when the starters were out there, the Pacers were beating the Bucks. But as soon as they went to the bench, whether it was him, it was talking about McConnell, or Benedict Mathurin, Obi Toppin, Thomas Bryant, etc., the Pacers just couldn't do anything.
Now, the question becomes the injury report for tonight and who is in and who is out. Obviously, Tyrese Halliburton, we wondered if he was going to be able to play in the back-to-backs. He did do that. I don't think he would be a rest situation tonight, Eddie, but where do things stand?
Tyrese Halliburton, questionable. It is not his hip. It is not his groin. It is not his hamstring. Sore lower back. Johnny Furphy, questionable. He missed that game in Milwaukee with an illness. Pascal Siakam is out due to personal reasons.
Personal reasons, really?
Mm-hmm. First game this season that Siakam has missed.
Okay.
And Isaiah Jackson out, right Achilles tendon tear.
Yeah. Well, may I ask a dumb question? I'm raising my hand in the back.
You're allowed to. It's your show.
This is a combined joint effort, Eddie, as we know. This is a show for all of the people listening, right?
Well, it is Query and Company.
I know. I'm very uncomfortable with that. When Isaiah Jackson was injured, I mean, I realize that's like an 18-month injury. Was he officially put on a list that eliminates him for the year, or is it necessary for them to list him as out individually?
It's necessary because the NBA doesn't have like an injured reserve in football or season-ending IL in baseball or anything like that.
But there is no chance, nor has there ever been discussion, am I correct, in saying that he will be available to return this season?
That is probably an accurate statement, yes.
Okay. So that game gets underway 8 o'clock tonight, is that right?
Yep, 8 o'clock tonight, yes.
Pacers and Timberwolves. All right, Eddie, you are looking at your bracket here, okay? Do you have your bracket? This is bracket matchups and that kind of thing are very similar to your fantasy football team. Nobody cares. But give me the two teams that you look towards and you feel like first off, there were some very odd, of all years, this feels like the year that there is the most question within the selection committee of just what in the world is going on here, right?
Mm-hmm. Of course, you have the whole North Carolina thing with their AD getting over $100,000 for getting North Carolina into the tournament.
And he is the chair of the selection committee.
Yeah, he was this past year. I believe next year it's Minnesota's athletic director, which, by the way, they have a head coaching opening. And then you've got, like, Louisville. They were a top 15 team in the AP rankings, this most recent poll, and they come out as an 8 seed in the tournament. Michigan, who wins the Big Ten tournament, and they were one of the best teams in the Big Ten all season long. They beat Purdue 2 out of 3 times, and they're a seed line behind Purdue. They're a 5 seed. Purdue's a 4 seed, and it just didn't make sense. Then you have Auburn as the number 1 overall team. They don't win their conference tournament. Duke gets it done without Cooper Flagg, and I just don't get it. I thought Duke should have been the number 1 overall team.
I watched Tennessee and Auburn on Saturday, and I thought to myself, whoever wins this game is going to be the one that gets beat earlier in the NCAA tournament. And whoever loses this game is going to go on a run. And Auburn lost that game. I think Auburn's really good because Auburn is not only massively athletic and long and all of those things, but they play very well together. They move the ball around. They're pretty smart. And not that Tennessee's not.
Helps being a very old team, Jake. I think they're the oldest team in college basketball.
Yeah, I mean, and they look mature, I will say. Now, they lost that game. Tennessee was really good down the stretch of that game. Tennessee's very good as well. I'll tell you the two teams that I always pick two that I look at and I say I could see them going and making a run and surprising people. And one of these will probably flame out in the first round. But BYU has shooters all over the place, and they play at pace. They like to just come. They look a little bit like I'm saying in style. I'm not saying in terms of overall, aptitude and efficiency. But BYU looks a little bit like the Splash Brothers Golden State Warriors era, where they're just coming down and spraying it around, and they literally are burying it from 4 different guys, 22 feet each. I think BYU is very intriguing. Tough matchups, though. But if they get up against Wisconsin, I could see them upsetting Wisconsin because Wisconsin also likes to play fast, but BYU wants you to play fast because that's where they're most dangerous. I mentioned earlier, I just have a feeling about Arkansas. And because Arkansas is, I'm telling you, John Calipari just has a way with young teams of they get you overlook them a little bit because you think that they're not great because of their record, but then you realize that everything meshed together for them like later in the year, and that's where they really become kind of dangerous.
Not to mention they get one of the top freshman recruits of this past recruiting cycle, and he was probably going to be one of the best freshmen this year. Probably a one and done. Boogie Fland is back for the start of the NCAA tournament for
you could say tournament.
Arkansas, averaging 15 points and 6 assists per game.
Who's going to be the first number one bounced? The first number one seed? I do this poll every year on the Expos Twitter.
Ooh.
Houston, Duke, Auburn, and Florida. Which one's first?
I'll go Auburn.
Okay.
They've been struggling lately, and if they end up meeting Michigan, I think the two big lineup for Michigan could be problematic. But, of course, the big thing with Michigan is can they take care of the basketball because they turn it over at a very, very high rate.
Indiana is out of the tournament. Purdue, for the 8th consecutive year, is a 4 seed or better, which is a huge accomplishment for Purdue. But as for Indiana, I think there's something that might have happened this year beyond wins and losses. Beyond wins and losses, there may be something that happened this year that factored in to keeping Indiana out. We're going to get back into that about 18 minutes from now, and I will let you know what it is that I think was the ultimate kryptonite for Indiana, because there is something that did them in beyond just what happened with Carolina, West Virginia. There's a lot to unpack with that. We'll do that in about 18 minutes, but we'll do one more round here on the other side. Some numbers to give away at 239-1070. We'll do 5 or 6 of them here. Mike DeCourcy going to join us 2 o'clock hour to really break down the tournament stuff as well here on a Monday bracket version. Query and Company on the Fan. All right, here we go. We got numbers to give away. We got full lines. And we will begin with the guy that I think has been doing the numbers game for quite some time with this program. He is the official travel consultant for Query & Company. That's because he drives all the way from Northwest Ohio for Colts games each and every Sunday when they're at home. Mo from Ohio joins us. Hi, Mo. How are you?
I am great. Your company is the hardest to get a hold of, man. You got business going all the time.
Well, I'm telling you, Mo, people go crazy over the numbers, right? They go crazy over it. Now, here's the thing, Mo. I would like for you, you're one of the few members of the company that can vouch for this, though. You can verify that Shannon is, in fact, not a mythical figure, but you met her in the flesh at our party on Saturday. You came from Ohio for our party, and you got to meet her. And I appreciate not only that you made the drive, but you can verify that, yes, in fact, I do have I outkicked my coverage, right?
That's very, very true. And then I was impressed. And again, before that whole moment took place, I was in that group that was wondering, is this just a made-up kind of thing or not? So I can verify it.
My friend from summer camp that lives in Canada, yes. Okay. Mo, what number would you like?
I'm going to take 44.
By the way, Mo came to the Pacer game last week as well. You saw the Tyrese Halliburton shot, right?
Yes, I did.
That was 44 is off the board, Mo. Sorry. Here are the numbers that have been taken so far. What's that?
45.
Mo wasting 45 also gone. Here are the numbers that have been taken. I should read these off. Pay attention at home, please. Numbers 5, 7, 14, 20, 44, and 45 have been taken off the board. So, Mo, with that, give me another number.
19.
Number 19 for Mo. Is there a Mo, this is unbelievable. Is there a significance to the number 19 for you?
Well, my son, big Peyton Manning fan. I am too. But when I first started following the Colts, I was a Johnny Unitas fan. So the stuff that I relived, Caleb kind of went through, kind of the same stuff.
Okay, here we go. It is amazing that you would pick this particular number, Mo, because you got the Zips of Akron. The Zips of Akron for Mo. So he went from Northwest Ohio to Northeast Ohio. All right, let's go quickly through them. Rod, what's up? What number would you like?
Give me 29.
29, okay. Rod, you sound like a nice fella. Have you had your coffee yet today, Rod?
Oh, yeah. You
okay.
Betcha.
Rod, what if I told you that you got a school that has actually been named for one of the founding fathers of the country, and if I'm not mistaken, one of just two men to have signed both the constitutional papers and the Declaration of Independence. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Washington.
Close. His friends called him Bob, but you got Robert Morris. Robert Morris goes to Rod. Keep in mind, and they are the Horizon League champion, but biggest blowout team also wins you. Guy with the cool name, Jacob, up next. Jacob, what's up?
Hey, Jason, actually.
Jason, sorry, what's up?
Getting ready to go shop at Meyer in Plainfield.
Okay, fair enough. If you're in Meyer and Plainfield, say hi. Anything in particular you're buying?
No, just wasting time, actually.
That's where a lot of people like to just go and hang out and waste time. That's what I do a lot of times on a Saturday. What do you do? Just hanging out, walking around. All right, what number would you like, Jason?
Number 4.
Do you consider calling this radio station also to be just wasting time?
Not at all.
Okay, good. I'm happy about that. Number 4. I've been to all 50 U.S. states, Jason. Do you happen to know which state became the 50th for me?
I'm going to say Kentucky.
No, that would have been one of the first states I ever went to. Eddie, go ahead and hit him here. Nice. The Lobos of New Mexico off the board. George up next. Hi, George.
Hey, let's go with number 1.
George, I like that, man. You got right to it. I absolutely love it, George. Who are you a fan of, George, in college basketball?
And all that good stuff. So
that's right. Who are you a fan of, George, in basketball?
I mean, I'm a Hoosier fan. I love the Hoosiers.
Okay, well, if you had to root for a team with an I out of the Big Ten and Indiana was not available, then this one is.
We'll say Illinois.
That is correct. The Fighting Illini of Illinois off the board. John will be one of the last two callers that we take from here.
Which one are we going with here? We've got 2 Johns and 2 John D's.
Take John D number 1 here. John, what's up?
Hey, how are you today? I'm good.
Good.
Loving St. Patrick's Day, missing my mother. Always had a good time with her.
What's your mom's name, John?
It was Ruth.
Ruth? And
her Watson and her mom and dad were both right from the island.
And I'm assuming that Ruth is with us in spirit only now, correct?
Oh, yeah. I went by, just got done with the graveyard, had to light a candle for St. Patrick's Day.
Well, that's wonderful. John, I can appreciate that, and our hearts out to Ruth. And obviously, we will think about her today when we go and have a green beer after the show today. All right? John, what number would you like?
23.
Number 23. Ooh, John. Are you a Michael Jordan fan, John?
I am.
Here's who you got, John.
Tar Heels?
Do you know what kind of animal this is, John?
No.
That is a Wolverine. The Michigan Wolverines are off the board to John. We got one last John to round us out here. One last John. Hi, John. How are you?
Hello, Jake. I'm going to take number 17 for St. Patty's Day.
Was this my buddy John? This is my buddy John, right?
Yes, it is.
Now, John, can I share on the air how you and I met, or would you rather I not?
That's fine.
John and I met 5 years ago when I walked into a gas station. We won't say which one, John. John was the clerk, and I walked in during an armed robbery. John was being held up. The watchman decided that it was in the best interest to go ahead and make sure that I wasn't going to get involved. So all of a sudden, John and I are both looking down the same similar cylindrical feature, which was not favorable. I went back later as witness to be able to tell what it was that I had seen. And the next night when I was driving past said gas station, John was there working. And I've never been more impressed in my life that you were back working the next day and you told me, you know what, I only get so many days off and I got bills to pay and a family to feed and whatever else. And, John, I said at that time, you and I are linked forever. And lo and behold, here we still are. We're buddies 5 years later, so at least something good came of it, right?
Yes, sir.
You said number 17?
Yes.
Oh, well, this is, John, this couldn't be more perfect. Could not be more perfect. Here's Johnny. That's exactly correct. Johnny. Because, John, you are, as you know, in my eyes, man, I have always considered you a saint. And, in fact, St. John's, the number 2 seed, goes to my buddy John. Cluster truck, a week's worth on the line, or gift cards, hat as well. John, it is always a pleasure talking to you. And every single time I know one thing, and that is that it's going to be more pleasurable than the first conversations that we ever had in the unique situations of the way life works. All right, we come back. Indiana is out. Purdue is a 4 seed. But what exactly led into Indiana's omission? And is it something actually that might have happened that didn't have anything to do with the court? I'll explain next. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all. It certainly feels like at this point it's like, man, it was a fun and long weekend of St. Patrick's Day celebrations for certain. We went out Friday night, went downtown and had, just to soak in the atmosphere. It was right after it was during the Maryland-Illinois game, and there was suddenly a sea of Illinois fans downtown with plenty of time still left in the game. And then Saturday, some dynamic finishes, obviously. Thank you to everybody that came out for the party Saturday night. Yesterday, our colleague Minnie Winkler was out at King Jug as the Elect were playing. I went to that. It was great. Kansas City fans Steve and Brenda were there. It was great to see them. Harley was there. It's great to see him. It was a lot of fun. It's been a fun weekend.
You brought Shannon by the studio to see me?
I did. We did. She did come in and say hi to you and Pat Boylan.
But let's be honest, she only came in to say hi to me.
She was like, I thought you said that the JMV takeover's tonight. I said, no, that's tomorrow night.
I know you went right up there to John because it was that Saturday night? No, it was Friday.
It was Friday. Yeah, it was Friday. The tournament then, so I love Selection Sunday. I love everything about it. It's always the sign that springs upon you. The weather starts to turn a little bit. It's, towards the better, and it was a fabulous Friday, certainly. The end of last week was gorgeous. Looking forward to getting back to more of that. But here comes Selection Sunday. And I had said on this radio show and anywhere else that I was asked, after Indiana beat Ohio State to conclude the Big Ten season and the regular season, I really felt strongly that got them in. I thought for certain they were in. And then it was like this weird yo-yo of, Colorado State. And then Boise State was not only in, they were solidly in. This is a question. There are a lot of inconsistencies with, and I let me rephrase that. The bracketology is not what they go off of. So when you say, well, wait a minute, how did Boise State go from being safely in the field to first four out? Well, that's not the selection committee that is prognosticating that. But when you look at the bracketology from a Joe Lunardi or a Jerry Palmer, any of those, Mike DeCourcy, and I'll ask DeCourcy when he joins us here, which he's going to be doing so in just over 25 minutes, how a team whose season is complete can move up or move down or whatever. Well, obviously you move down because others who are still winning are winning around you. So Boise State, for example, was thought to be in the field and in the field fairly safely. They get to their conference final against Colorado State. Colorado State beats them to get the automatic qualifier, and that bounces Boise State out. And I thought Boise State had a pretty good year. The thing that stinks is this, and I'm not the first that is pointing this out to you folks. North Carolina, you could make the argument that North Carolina got in because of the way they played down the stretch. North Carolina has 2 losses since Valentine's Day, and both are to Duke. And one of them, they may well have defeated Duke, except for a lane violation. I know Cooper Flagg wasn't playing, but still, Duke is very, very good. So you give credit to Carolina for the fact that when it was most important, they finally started turning in decent assignments. But they basically were C- to D+ students for the first 9 weeks of the semester. Now, I realize that you have this system now, and it seems like the criteria changes every year. No, it's quad 1 wins. You got to have this number of quad 1 wins. A year ago, Oklahoma. I don't know that a lot of people realize this. 1 year ago, Oklahoma was, I believe, 4-0 in quad 1 game. I'm sorry, they had 4 quad 1 wins. They had no losses. They were unbeaten in the quad 2 and the quad 3. They did not lose a game that they were supposed to win. They won all the games they were supposed to last year, Oklahoma, and they did not get in the field. So Indiana is waiting, and you knew that the teams that they were hanging around with were Xavier, Texas, and North Carolina, and West Virginia. And I go back to, think of it like the elevator. The elevator doors open. It's a packed elevator. The last 3 people on the elevator actually have their back to the door because when they got on there, they're like pushing their way on. They didn't even get a chance to like turn around and back in, right? So you're looking at the elevator and the doors open, and you're like, oh wow, wait a minute. Texas, Xavier, they're on the elevator. And West Virginia, North Carolina, and Indiana are waiting, and there's only spot for one person. And lo and behold, North Carolina gets asked onto the elevator, and the doors close, and Indiana and West Virginia are left out. Now, West Virginia. The North Carolina thing is very fishy, and it smells, and it doesn't pass the eye test because North Carolina, other than the way that they played down the stretch, yes, they beat everybody but two games since Valentine's Day. But none of those teams, I don't think any of them went to the tournament. They're all middling ACC teams in a down ACC. They played Duke twice, they lost twice. But Carolina happens to have an athletic director who is the chair of the selection committee. And yes, I realize that the chair of the selection committee has to leave the room. And I realize that he got a 100 and, depending on a six-figure, let's say that, a six-figure bonus as the athletic director at North Carolina for the Tar Heels getting into the tournament. And I realize that when he gets up, when North Carolina is being discussed, now this is where, to me, this is where things don't add up. They can tell you that that they just look at blank sheets of paper and they don't have the team name on it. And they're comparing the criteria of the two different teams. They can tell you that, but if that's the case, isn't it pretty obvious that one of them's Carolina when they say to the athletic director of North Carolina, you have to leave the room now? Okay, so I know one of these we're talking about is Carolina. And maybe they do now see the names at the top. But either way, imagine if you're on a jury. And when you're in a jury, you're sitting there, and the defense shows, or the prosecution, I guess is better. The prosecution shows photos of the crime scene. And you see it, and you see the foot of the defendant in the photo. And then the judge says, wait a minute, we didn't clarify that you're allowed to use that photo, and I'm striking that from the record. And then they turn to the jury and they say, you have to pretend you did not see those photos. Okay. I get the fact that you're being told that you can't weigh that in, but there's no way through human nature it's not in the back of your mind. And likewise, when the athletic director for University of North Carolina is on the selection committee and gets a bonus for Carolina getting into the tournament, he can sit there, you can tell me that he has to leave the room, but you don't think that he had conversation with or just his overall presence in the room, even if there's no monkey business going on, no funny business going on. You don't think that the rest of the room doesn't say, he just left the room and he is a good dude. And that's his school. And I don't know who this other school is, but yeah, I mean, look what they've done. They've won 9 of their last 11 games. Okay, sure. That seems okay. But where all of this to me is a moot point for Indiana is twofold. Did Indiana get a raw deal? Yes. Did Indiana, for the most part, do what they were supposed to do? Kind of. Indiana had 4 wins in the quad one, but they had a lot of losses. They had plenty of cracks. They had a lot of scratches to be able to get those 4. They had a lot of opportunities. What was their overall record in the quad one, Eddie? Do you know? Was it 4-12?
4-13 for IU, 1-12 for North Carolina.
So 4-13. But my point being, exclusive of North Carolina, if you're just looking at the Indiana stuff, exclusive of that, when you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, so based on that, Indiana had 13 other opportunities to improve upon themselves and did not do so. Number one. But number two, I think if you were really going to look at it, it's West Virginia that got the bigger raw deal. West Virginia beat Gonzaga. West Virginia beat Arizona. West Virginia beat Iowa State. West Virginia beat Kansas. And some of their losses they had, West Virginia, yeah, I mean, they lost to Louisville. They lost to Arizona. They lost to Arizona State. That's not good. Kansas State. I mean, they had some ugly ones in there. But I thought West Virginia had a really good body of work. Having said all of that, here's where I think Indiana erred. And this is why, the two reasons why, I'm not going to say I was okay with Indiana not getting in, but the two things that I think most hurt Indiana. Okay? Number one, you can look at outside perceptions, an outside narrative about Indiana, and you can call it whatever you want. I actually believe that the tournament selection committee is using the term metrics. Now, here is last night on Wish Television. Here is on Wish TV, the NCAA selection committee explaining the reason Indiana was left out.
I tell you, it was tough. Indiana didn't have a single loss outside the first quadrant. But, they didn't play that well in the challenging non-conference schedule. So the metrics were just slightly below the ones that ended up getting in.
To be honest with you, when you look at the opportunities that they had in the Quad 1 area, they didn't take advantage of those opportunities in a way, and then their metrics also were down relative to the teams that got into the field. That's really kind of what it came down to.
Now, I don't know what metrics you'd be talking about if they're 4-13, considering that Carolina was 1-12. But the biggest thing to me is this, and I realize that this, when they talk about metrics, I'm not saying this was a factor in why Indiana was left out. But it's difficult as a fan base to complain about or try to rally the troops and make claim or statement that your team got a raw deal when you as a fan base were chanting at a home game that your coach should be fired in the middle of the season. Then he's into a forced retirement before the year's even over with. You're booing players at the scorer's table. The metrics in terms of the perception of Indiana basketball from the outside, because of the Indiana fan base itself, was that the year in its own right was a complete dumpster fire disaster that merited starting all over again. And I'm not saying that factors into the committee. I don't think it does factor into the committee. But it's kind of like when the jury says you can't actually take into consideration the photo we just showed you. Anybody who follows college basketball has been hearing all year long that Indiana's season has been a disappointment and a failure. So then you can't, on the 365th day, expect everybody to then stand up and say, but listen to our reasons why actually it was successful. Indiana has nobody to blame but themselves, in my opinion, for not getting in. But there are a lot of other issues with issues is the wrong word, topics to discuss. Mike DeCourcy is the dean of college basketball writers and has been very good with his time on this program. Joins us now. Of course, you see him on Big Ten Network amongst the myriad of places where you can read and see his work, and joins us on the guest line. Mike, let's begin with this, and I'll get right to that. I want your thought on this. I actually thought, do I think the thing with North Carolina is fishy? Sure. But I thought West Virginia was the bigger snub than Indiana, and maybe that's unpopular to say in Indiana. Your thoughts?
It may be unpopular, but it's accurate. Indiana should have been in the field because, one, they took a team in Xavier that was less qualified already. So then they took in North Carolina a team that was probably the least qualified team it is definitely the least qualified team in my memory. I can't recall anybody anywhere near that level. There's so many people reaching for different things to use to justify their inclusion, but the part of it that obviously bothers people is the fact that their athletic director was the chair of the selection committee. And the whole part about, well, I'm not in the room when those choices are made. Yeah. But it's not like, okay, we're going to talk about Carolina. So Bubba's going to go out to IMD and hop in a plane, go back to Chapel Hill. He comes back in the room when they're done.
Right.
And that's unavoidable.
And it's pretty obvious who you're talking about at that point, right?
Right. And so you're done talking, and then you got to look at him in the eye and say, and Bubba's a good guy. I like him. I think he's a terrific AD and a great guy. And so I guess I'd be inclined to want to do a solid for him. I don't know. I mean, but honestly, if I were in that room, and with the college football committee, they do put a retired media person in that room. They have on every occasion since they installed it. They don't do that here. They don't put. Of course, I'm not retired, so I'm not eligible, but they don't put anybody that's not an athletic administrator in that room. But if I were in that room, I'd say, you know what? I really like Bubba, but his team's not good enough. They didn't do enough. I've known Sean Miller since he was in high school. And a lot of Xavier fans over the weekend, when I didn't have Xavier in my field, were really coming after me on Twitter, some of it vile, to be honest with you. And I'm like, I've known Sean forever. Like, if there's a team I'd like to see get in, yeah, great. But they didn't win enough games. So I could be there and say no to Bubba, even if he's in the room, because that team, there is no qualification that says they're a tournament team. They played 10 games against tournament teams in the at-large section of the field. I think they might have had one win against a automatic qualifier from way down the seed list. But they played 10 games against NCAA tournament level opposition, and they won one game. I mean, that's just, you can't fail 90% of the time and be rewarded for that.
Do you believe, Mike, that the athletic director being the chairman of the committee was a factor in North Carolina's inclusion?
Well, I mean, I think I just said, I think that there was the inclination to be kind, I think. But I think it was more the inclination to be kind to North Carolina. Because they are a huge brand in the sport.
Mike, I didn't mean to cut you off. I could not agree more. To me, and I've always felt this way, and I don't even mean this as a demerit of human nature, but human nature dictates that, like, there are certain things. North Carolina is, you could make the argument they're the biggest blue blood. I mean, I know Kentucky but North Carolina is a massive, massive brand, right? And so the NCAA tournament feels like an NCAA tournament when it includes North Carolina. So there just is, you have a natural instinct of giving them benefit of the doubt that other teams, given the same circumstances, would not get, right?
But here's the thing. I've been following this committee really closely for 5 tournaments now. 1 year I did the brackets, and of course we didn't have one. But 5 years of really closely following exactly what they do and being, involved in the process of trying to mimic what they do. And then beyond that, another 25 years of covering college basketball nationally for the sporting news. And beyond that, another 12 or 13 years covering individual teams for newspapers, and always being interested in the process. And I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen a team with this vacant a resume, no matter what their name is, get the opportunity to be involved. And let's not forget, I mean, it's not like Indiana doesn't draw viewers. When they were in the first four a couple of years ago, 2022, I believe, they had good ratings. So if that was all it was about, well, then you should leave out San Diego State and put Indiana in. So it wasn't that exclusively. They ignored a significant television draw to put in another significant television draw. I think that in doing this, they really eroded decades worth of confidence that had been built in the committee. And how do you know how off the mark they are? Well, I mean, one way is to look at the bracket matrix and look at the people who spend their time trying to do this and following the principles that are set by the committee and trying to match what they do. I mean, remember, what I do when I put my bracket together, it's not what Mike DeCourcy thinks should happen, because I would have had Texas in there. I would have had I wouldn't even have thought about Carolina for a second. I had Carolina in my bracket on Saturday, and then I talked myself out of it. I thought, no, they won't do this. It's just so wrong. And they did it anyway. But it's not about what I think. It's about what I think they will think. And it's trying to figure that out that we're doing. And that's most of what you see in the online bracket game as well. They want to be the one who has the best score at the end of the day. That's why it's kind of a badge of honor to be on the bracket matrix and have the top-ranked bracket. So they're trying to do that. And out of all of them, when I checked last night, and so I know these numbers, there were 167 brackets when I was on the air last night. And at that point, I think it was 164 had West Virginia in, and I believe the number was 30 had Carolina in.
Wow. Yeah, I thought West Virginia had a really solid year. Mike DeCourcy, our guest, joining us here on the guest line. Mike, give me a team outside of this conversation. Louisville certainly comes to mind, so I'll lead the witness here. But a team that you just thought, based on their season, one way or the other, either somebody that got a really good draw and you said, man, they got to be doing backflips, or somebody that you thought they deserve better.
Well, the Louisville seeding makes zero sense. I mean, I wrote in one of the articles that I did about the draw that it was so off that it felt like a typo. I mean, their resume metrics were ranked in the top 15. Their predictive metrics weren't that far. Basically, we're somewhere in the ballpark of the top 25. And then they get the equivalent of the top, a 32, the 32nd seed, somewhere between 29 and 32.
And so additionally, Mike, if you want to say, that rattling off a double-digit win streak in the ACC this year has demerit because the ACC is down, then you have to take that away from Carolina, right? And you have to say
exactly. It's completely contradictory, Jake. That's why the seed, even in a vacuum, the seed of Louisville makes no sense. But when you add in that factor that they valued Carolina's romp through, and this is true, they won 6 consecutive games in February, early March, prior to their home loss against Duke. They won 6 consecutive games against ACC teams. Ooh, that sounds good, right? Average net rank of 144. 144. There is not a single team in the Big 10, Big 12, SEC out of all those 3 leagues. That's more than 40 teams. There is not a single one that is lower than 117th.
Yeah, I mean, Louisville lost twice between Christmas and St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I mean, the league was horrible. So what do? So you go out and preferably you beat teams that are outside your league that are quality. And that's something that Louisville did to an extent in the Bahamas, et cetera. It's not something that Carolina ever did.
Mike, who do you like in terms of a non-number one seed? You and I talked about this, I think, last time you were on. I like the pacing that this team can play, and therefore I think there's a really intriguing matchup in round 2. Not sit here and go bracket by bracket, but in other words, I think BYU could make a run. Wisconsin is really good, but Wisconsin plays a pace I think BYU would enjoy. I think BYU is a team that people don't know a lot about that can score in bunches. But who else am I missing that's somebody that you look at it and you go, hey, people are going to like this team. They're going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, no fair. You took mine.
Sorry.
BYU is the one seed from outside the higher range that I have making it to the Elite Eight. I have them playing, I believe, Duke in their Elite Eight game. I really like the BYU team. I like Wisconsin's squad. I think I like Wisconsin's squad more than some of the players like it. And I don't mean they don't like each other. I mean that there are so many times when you say to yourself, please take that shot. Please, it's wide open. You're not open for a reason. You're open because the defense can't keep up with your offense. So take the shot. I mean, yesterday I was watching for a second. After tip-off, I went back to after we did our pregame show and tip-off, I went back to the green room so that I could put some things together, make sure everything was together so that I was ready for the bracket show. And so I'm listening to Grant Hill on the analysis, and he references Stephen Crowell needing to take an open shot that was wide open for him. And I laughed so hard because every single BTN analyst I've worked with, including me, over the past 3 years, has said that exact same thing about him. And eventually that gets you beat. You can't pass up quality opportunities against NCAA tournament-level defenses and expect you're going to get another one in the same possession.
When I look, Mike, one other question, then I got a final IU one for you. But St. John's, I love what Rick Pitino's done. I think he's obviously, a generational coach. I've watched a little of St. John's. They defend like nobody's business, and they'll come all the way out to the three-point line to defend and make life hell for you. But in today's college basketball 2025, can you win that way, or did they need better scoring? Does St. John's score enough, or am I totally off base?
The only way I think that they can score enough is if they play as they have over the last 2 weeks. That's hard to rely upon because it doesn't have a full season worth of data, et cetera, to verify. But if you look at R.J. Lewis, their leading scorer, I think he's third-team All-American for the Sporting News, Big East Player of the Year. My personal preference, going to get this out there because I'm shouting into the wind, but I would have picked Kadari Richmond, who I believe is a dominating player for them. But R.J. is the guy who can make the difference now. Kadari's going to be what he is, has been for 5 years in college. But R.J. is starting to get it. He's an elite athlete, big for a wing, and he made, over the last 8 games, I believe it is, shots. If you watched in the Creighton game on Saturday night, they won the Big East tournament because Creighton thought they could get away with leaving him open, and he stuck, I think, 2 or 3 threes in the second half, and that broke the game open. If he plays like that, they've got a chance. I don't think they can win it because I don't think you can come from that far back on offense and win at that level. But I could see them in San Antonio if you see those numbers from RJ. Otherwise, they're going to get beaten somewhere along the line. There are a lot of good teams in that region. They need that because there's no one else that's going to hit at that rate and take that volume of shots to be a difference maker.
Lastly, Mike DeCourcy, our guest, joining us here. Of course, busy weekend with Big Ten Network and everything else going on with the NCAA tournament. From the things that you hear from the people you've talked to, it is your belief that Indiana has narrowed down to what list of what you would perceive to be finalists or still in the mix for their head coaching job?
I'm going to be honest with you, Jake. I mean, obviously I'm hanging around a lot of Big Ten people. I was at the tournament. And it's just, I think it feels like it's fairly locked down. I've seen some names pop up that others who are much more locked into IU than I am have suggested, and it sounded to me like, boy, that doesn't sound like what they'll do because it just doesn't feel like that's going to be a difference maker. But I still am thinking about, I've heard that TJ Otzelberger is not persuadable. I've heard that.
Okay. That's Iowa State, by the way. For me, I would make 100% sure that he's not, because IU is a place where he can win a national championship. I have no doubt about that. I don't believe that is plausible at Iowa State or one of the terrific coaches they've had, including Johnny Orr, Fred Hoiberg, et cetera. One of them would have got, and Greg McDermott was there too. One of them would have at least gotten into the Final Four. It's never happened. I'm not saying that TJ can't get them to a Final Four, and if that's the horizon that you're shooting for, go for it. But you're not going to win them all at that place, and you can, we know, at Indiana. The Ben McCollum, by the way, is he a factor for Iowa now, and is that maybe why Iowa made that move, or are they looking for the guy that he replaced at Drake in DeVries, who's at West Virginia?
Yeah, I think that's going to probably be the first place they look, and I don't think this helped. The whole snub didn't exactly help West Virginia's case in that regard. But I do think that the first call would be there. Ben McCollum is a fantastic basketball coach. But do you go from what Fran did and how entertaining it was and how fun it was and how comfortably they were able to recruit elite talent into that system to the literal slowest team in college basketball? I mean, look, I can say this. Grant McCaslin, another guy I like for the IU job, was somewhat similar when he was at North Texas, presumably because that worked. I mean, that you remember the Purdue game back in 21, they were just going to grind you. And then he went to Texas Tech and started getting some ballers, and all of a sudden they're one of the fastest teams in college basketball. So maybe that's what Ben would do at Iowa, but he's got a longer track record. I kind of think not. I just don't see how that is what you seize upon for a guy who's been in D1 for 1 year again, a fantastic coach, but I don't know if that's the direction I'd go if I'm Iowa after what they were able to experience over the last 15 years.
Mike, I appreciate the time as always. I know you're busy. We'll keep an eye on all of it and hopefully talk soon, but I know you're going to be busy. It's the best time of year, man, so certainly enjoy it.
Thanks, Jake.
All right, Mike DeCourcy joining us, talking college basketball. A lot to discuss and unpack. We may have time for one more round of the numbers game, and we can get back into the conversation. You can join in as well at 239-1070 on whether or not Indiana was snubbed. There is interesting news regarding those like Indiana that did not get on the elevator and they decided to push the button again for it. I'll explain who and what I'm talking about next. Here's an interesting anecdote, if you will, if that's the right word, amendment to the NCAA tournament selection snub of West Virginia. I feel like this happened a year ago as well. Maybe this happens every year. This report from WTRF, I don't know if that's in West Virginia, but the state of West Virginia said they are launching an investigation against the NCAA after the West Virginia Mountaineers were left out of the men's basketball tournament. West Virginia Attorney General J.B. McCluskey is asking the NCAA to provide explanation for their selection process for the NCAA men's basketball tournament. West Virginia University's men's basketball team had an incredible season and were in every single expert bracket projection leading up to Sunday's selection show, making their snub difficult to understand. The Attorney General believes, I'm reading this from the television station, the Attorney General believes the public deserves to know what objective metrics are used by the committee to ensure the best 68 teams are in the tournament. I understand that. I certainly understand the frustration. I understand the desire to get to the bottom of it, especially considering that the selection committee chair is the athletic director at North Carolina, who was essentially the last in. But the reality is that West Virginia and the explanation for their omission and Indiana's omission, all of that comes down to the fact that, yeah, I think the tournament selection committee actually did somewhat explain. Eddie, I believe we have the audio from last night on Wish Television when they were asked to explain why Indiana did not get in and North Carolina did. That explanation, one would seem to think, applies to West Virginia as well. Here's how that was explained.
I tell you, it was tough. Indiana didn't have a single loss outside the first quadrant. But, they didn't play that well in the challenging non-conference schedule. So the metrics were just slightly below the ones that ended up getting in.
To be honest with you, when you look at the opportunities that they had in the Quad 1 area, they didn't take advantage of those opportunities in a way, and then their metrics also were down relative to the teams that got into the field. That's really kind of what it came down to.
Now, you heard me say on here, did Indiana get snubbed? Probably. But I thought West Virginia got more snubbed. But in terms of, like, we're going to take legal action and demand an explanation, that's exactly what they're going to say. They're going to come out and say, hey, you know what, the metrics were such that you didn't take advantage of, whether it be a league that we thought you had losses that were, you had too many losses that we thought were bad losses. There you go, right?
Well, not to mention when Bubba Cunningham went on with CBS after they announced the bracket, they asked about West Virginia, and he said the fact that Tucker DeVries, the Suns head coach and one of their better players for the Mountaineers, was injured and not going to play was a factor into why they didn't make the tournament. So they factored in the fact that a guy that had been missing most of the season for them wasn't going to be in the tournament, held them out of the tournament.
We have tickets to give away. Is that correct?
Yes.
For Mary J. Blige?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. That was the show on April 21st. They are for what?
Counting Crows.
Oh, yeah, that's who you just played it, right?
Yes.
When is Counting Crows going to be in concert?
That is Saturday, June 14th at the Everwise Amphitheater at White River State Park.
That'll be awesome. Awesome night downtown, summer night.
With a special guest, too, the Gaslight Anthem.
I'm telling you, man, Counting Crows is fabulous. We have tickets to give away. You want to do that now, Eddie? You want to do it on the other side?
Let's do it now.
Okay, if you are caller number 3 right now at 239-1070, you are on your way to go see Counting Crows. It'll happen June 14th downtown at the Everwise Amphitheater at the Lawn. Again, 239-1070, caller 3 right now. We will discuss and break that down tomorrow. I'm certain JMV will also get you squared away for that. He'll be in just a couple of minutes here. We have a couple of numbers to give away still, Eddie?
We're giving away 14. I don't want to get behind the 8 ball, so we should probably give away a few more.
Okay, so here's the thing. Here are the numbers that have been taken. If you're calling in right now or if you're interested in a number for our numbers game, please bear in mind these numbers are taken, okay? These are the occupied numbers. So you can call in right now at 239-1070. Numbers 1, 4, 5, 7, 14, 17, 19, 20, 23, 29, 44, and 45 are taken. Those are the numbers that are taken. If you call in, you ask for one of those, wasted a phone call. Again, 1, 3, 4, 7, 14, 17, 19, 20, 23, 29, 44, and 45 are spoken for. Joel will lead us off. Eddie said, hang on just a second, because the phone lines are drunk, and so's Eddie. So that's the big thing when you call in. You give me the number that you want. You know, your wife's birthday, the number of kids you have, whatever it might be. And by the way, typically we like to get at least one female listener to call in on the program. We only have 19 total on the show, and we need at least one to verify that, yes, in fact, women do listen to Sports Talk Radio and listen to this show. Again, 3 ways to win. You get the national champion, you get the team that is the double-digit seed to advance the furthest, or you get the team that is defeated by the largest margin in the tournament. There are tiebreakers for those. $50 gift card to Cluster Truck and a hat of your team for second place, $25 card and a hat for third place, and a week's worth of Cluster Truck food to the winner. Joel will, in fact, lead us off for the numbers game. Hi, Joel. How are you?
How are you?
You there, Joel?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what number would you like, Joel?
Can I do number 10, please?
Number 10. Is there a significance to the number of 10 in your life?
Yeah, my son was born on May 10th. So
oh, well, that's cool.
5 was taken.
By the way, May 10th is Boo's birthday, my cat, for what that's worth. Not clearly the same as your son, I realize. But speaking of animals, by the way, you got one for number 10. The hell is that, Eddie? Is that supposed to be a husky? That's a guy. That's a guy. That's not a husky. That's a guy.
That's a husky howling.
No, that's your neighbor Alan, who's drunk.
No.
That is not a husky. UConn off the board. The 2-time defending champ UConn Huskies off the board. Kirk is up next. Hi, Kirk. What number?
I'm sorry. I was calling when you were saying the numbers that were available. So 17 taken?
17 is, in fact, taken. Give me one more.
10. Oh, sorry. 4.
4 is also taken.
Gosh.
All right, here we go. Here are the numbers. Here are the numbers that have been taken. 1, 3, 4, 7, 10, 14, 17, 19, 20, 23. Stop me at any point when you hear like a number that sounds like it hasn't been called yet. 29.
23.
What's that?
23.
23 is taken, like I just said.
Oh, 24.
24. All right, eventually we'll get there.
I know.
Okay. Kirk, just out of curiosity, are you an NBA fan?
Somewhat, yes.
Do you wear really short shorts?
I did when I played way back when.
Hell yeah, so too did John Stockton, and he is, of course, from the Jazz of Utah, and you got Utah State. Utah State off the board. Chase is up next.
I want to make one note here.
Yes,
I feel
sir.
bad for Tony. I accidentally hit the wrong button. I dropped him. So, Tony M., if you got dropped, I'm so sorry.
Sorry, Tony. Blame Eddie and his fat fingers. Chase, what's up?
Hey, I'm going to go with number 12.
Number 12. Any significance to the number 12, Chase?
It was my 40th birthday this month.
Oh, nice. It was your what birthday?
40.
40th birthday, and that relates to the number 12 exactly how? On the 12th?
Yep.
Okay. I thought maybe it's because you're a fan of Steve Alford. Let me ask you this question, Chase. Do you happen to know where I began my college career?
I don't remember where you began, but I know you finished IU.
That is correct. Chase, you got in number 12. Steve Alford was my all-time favorite player. I began my college career at this particular school. Kansas off the board. Chase gets Kansas off the board. Okay, we got time for like 2 more here. Matt. What's up, Matt?
Yeah. Hey, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. What number would you like?
Let's go number 9.
Are you a fan of the Beatles?
Oh, yeah.
Number 9? Number 9. Matt, here's the thing. You got one of those unique situations where you have a play-in game, which means bonus. You get 2 teams here, right? Keep in mind, largest margin of victory if one of these teams gets blown out in round 1 when they got to go and take on a number 1 seed. Alabama State or St. Francis. You got one of those 2. We'll go with one more here. I will let dealer's choice. Eddie, you pick. Who are we going with last?
Let's go with Rom.
Rom, what's up?
Man, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. You?
Hey, we're awake. It's all good.
You sound like a good dude. You just hanging out? You sound like you're just hanging out.
I'm at work.
Okay. Everything going okay at work?
Hey, we're doing fine. Sounds like you're doing pretty good yourself.
Well, I'm trying. You tell me, Ron. Does it sound like we're doing okay at work today, or does it sound like I've had a rough work day?
Oh, no, you're having a wonderful day at work.
What number would you like, Ron?
He gets to work with me every day, of course.
That's right.
How about lucky number 13?
Lucky number 13 for Rom. I'll tell you what, man. This team, there are several of them that seemingly got a bad draw in terms of their seeding. And, Eddie, I will let you hit up the sounder here for number 13. The hell is that?
That is a cry of a golden eagle.
Is it really?
Yes. Not to be confused with something else.
Marquette off the board. Actually, John just walked in, but I'm going to go one more. Let's go to Neil to round things out. Neil, what's up?
How you doing today?
I'm good. What number would you like?
Number 2.
Number 2. Neil, I don't know if you heard at the beginning of the show, but Evan from Cluster Truck, who is the kind donor of our awards and prizes for this, I told him that he would be in the running for a hat, but we would leave the number open. You got for number 2, you will be, do we have a sounder for this one, Eddie? We do not? What if I told you, Neil, that the sounder is this? Who does that remind you of, Neil?
Chris Farley?
Not bad. What about this?
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Who's that?
Elvis Presley.
Okay, you got Memphis, baby. Memphis is off the board. Appreciate you calling in. We'll give away more numbers tomorrow. JMV is here. He's got on his
Was that
dressed
Neil?
for St. Patrick's Day. That was Neil. What's going on, John?
Well, I so much want to go to like a 12-year-old reference right there when we were 12 years old.
For which
I
one?
was going to ask where Bob was.
That's right. Nice.
I guess I did it anyway. What the hell? I might
That's
as
right.
well.
What you got lined up on the big program?
We have, what the hell do we have? Dane Fife coming on today somewhere. I think he's on vacation, so that should be fun as hell. And Ryan Conwell of Xavier and Pike, Indiana State a year ago, had 38 in the Big East semifinal loss against Marquette. Of course, they're in the first 4 coming up on Wednesday against Texas. That's Conwell and a couple of Indiana Staters on Texas's team, Jason Kent and Julian Larry. And Holder coming up in the 5 o'clock hour.
Nice.
How about you? How'd you do today? Kick ass?
Yeah, we had DeCourcy on. We talked a lot about the Indiana snub, obviously, the North Carolina kind of odd way of getting in. I thought West Virginia got screwed.
West Virginia, they're going to sue, right?
Yeah, I saw
Are they
that.
suing the NCAA or something?
Doesn't everybody do that every year now, though?
Listen, if you're Bubba Cunningham last night, and by the way, you know what I feel about committees. They're jokes for the most part, most of them. If you're Bubba Cunningham, you need to be more prepared with your answers instead of sounding like a complete boob like last night. Because that's exactly what he sounded like.
And do you really believe the whole, he had to leave the room and then,
no, hell no.
And then it's a blind draw. Yeah,
that's
sure.
it. And here's North Carolina because that's Bubba's team and they're a brand.
That's exactly correct.
But, I mean, it's not like West Virginia's the one that should be pissed.
Totally. No, West Virginia, I thought, got completely screwed. West Virginia should have gotten in over Indiana.
Yeah,
to be honest.
there's no doubt about it. So, I mean, IU screwed itself enough this season, but that was pretty much a joke last night. Committees. Why are committees so bad? Is there a good one? I know the itty-bitty committee is good, but other than that, I don't know if there's a good committee out there.
Mike Leach had a whole rant about committees once that was actually.
I got one good committee, and that's it.
A committee to start a committee, right? All right.
Did you giggle on that, Eddie?
I did.
Do you know what that was? That reference is
is
that in your era too? That reference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
John is up next. We will be back with you at noon tomorrow. We'll give away more numbers as well.
Congrats on your party too, by the way, man.
Thank
Saturday.
you. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.